Shit. So over the past couple of weeks, this article has been doing the rounds on my Twitter feed. It's from The Atlantic and written by Ian Bogost, a professor of interactive computing at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And yes, that title is as inflammatory as they come, baiting all the clicks towards the established magazine's flagship website. Neil Druckmann certainly didn't like it. So what does Ian Bogost's 2,000 plus word article actually say then? Is that title just nonsense? In a nutshell, you can boil down Ian's argument to the fact that he doesn't like environmental storytelling in video games, a device popularised by walking simulators where objects in the environment offer some colour as to what is actually happening in the world. Ian thinks all of that is just a bit toss, and he genuinely makes some good points in his article. And that is all well and good. That's his opinion. That's fine. Yet, I'm inclined to disagree with him. He puts books, TV and film above video games in their storytelling capabilities. But where I think his argument comes apart is when he fails to acknowledge that this environmental storytelling doesn't really tell stories in the traditional sense. In fact, he accuses developers of utilising this method as a shortcut to that storytelling level. In his dismissal, Bogost completely bypasses what environmental storytelling is truly representational of. The real world. Life does not have a beginning, middle, and an end. There is no story arc, no cliffhangers, and no real conclusions. All the tales that we can tease out of our real world are teased out in our environments. My immediate environment right now that I've lived in tells a tale of who I am. It's separated into bits and pieces scattered around that have to be put together in order to get a complete idea of what my life has been. Because my existence is sporadic. It hasn't been written and constructed by somebody. It's organic, and it's the tale of a life lived so far. Environmental storytelling in games imitates that more closely than it does the storytelling devices of TV, film, or literature. Last year, after my nan passed away, we had to clear out her house. We had to rifle through her documents in order to piece together her private life and figure out how she functioned behind closed doors. It was one of the most fascinating stories I've ever uncovered, not just because it was my nan or provided a lasting final insight into her life, but because it ignited the voyeur in me. We're all voyeuristic to a certain degree, poking our noses into other people's worlds and trying to catch a glimpse of a life that we can only imagine. Environmental storytelling harnesses that essence, that feeling that you get of that passing glance into somebody's open window, and it removes all consequence. Critically acclaimed walking simulator Gone Home does exactly this. It allows you to freely go through somebody's belongings, piece together a story about their life, and bring to light exactly what has happened to this person. And you're given the opportunity to take away from that what you will. There is no narrative that's being forced down your throat here. You're not given a predetermined perception of a character or a plot. You're allowed to develop your own perception of a character or of a narrative, and you're allowed to do that at your very own pace, much like how I came to perceive the private life of my nan. In this article, Ian Bogost misses that aspect entirely and reduces it down to bad storytelling when compared against storytelling tradition. But he doesn't leave it there. He doesn't leave it just with environmental storytelling either. He bashes video games for chasing the dream of cinema, for trying to emulate big screen exploits and ultimately failing. He calls this cinema envy, and I kind of get where he's coming from with this. I think video games should be able to find their feet and find their own defining aspect of the medium and not imitate others. However, even though games like Uncharted and The Last of Us do take heavy inspiration from that cinematic experience, their existence as a video game adds another layer to an experience that film cannot, and that's player involvement. You are required by the game to be a part of the narrative. Sure, that may just mean pushing forward on an analog stick and hitting a few buttons at the right time, but no matter how little that interaction may be, that interaction changes the entire dynamic of the story. Playing as Joel in The Last of Us puts me in a position where I have an interpersonal relationship with him. His survival, his well-being, and ultimately the progression of his story is my sole responsibility. The game pulls me into its world, makes me an integral participant in it, and tells me the story of The Last of Us from a far closer perspective than any other media can do. Once again, I must stress here that I do see where Bogost is coming from. His arguments do hold merit, and sometimes the 3D virtual world does produce some uncomfortable results despite their best intentions. Mass Effect Andromeda, for instance. Fucking Christ. Also, you have to be aware that this is the first 50 years of the medium, and in that relatively short time we've gone from playing games like Pong to playing games that allow us to walk with dinosaurs in a virtual reality world. In the same time frame, film was barely out of the silent movie era at this point. So Ian, for God's sake mate, just give him a break. Anyway, that is my rebuttal, my opinion. My opinion opposing Ian Bogost's opinion. Take it or leave it, agree or disagree. The onus is on you, whether or not you are in agreement with me or not. And if you're not in agreement with me, that's fine. I will think you're wrong, but I will happily allow you the opportunity to change my mind. These are not facts we're dealing with anyway. This is all just subjective. And that, my friend, that is exactly where I have major issue with this article. Now, I have no problem with Ian Bogost, the man, the scholar, the author. I have no problem with his opinion on storytelling in games. He makes some valid points, well-reasoned points, but I disagree with him. And yet I'm okay with that opinion existing. That's fine by me. What I do have an issue with, though, is the way in which this specific article states that opinion as fact. Getting a bit of a tickle in the old throat, mate. And in stating that video games would do better not pursuing narrative and not pursuing storytelling, he presents his opinion as doctrine, which should be adhered to by developers. And that's not okay. That's just not okay. It's almost as if Ian Bogost believes his opinion is worth more than others, and that games, a subjective medium, should adhere to his tastes. But that right there, that's really all this argument boils down to. Taste. My tastes are clearly different to Bogost's. I like environmental storytelling in games. I think it's effective. And he doesn't. And I'm totally okay with that. Again, I am totally okay with that opinion. But I'm not out here telling people how games should be developed. And I'm certainly not dictating how people should feel about a certain game. But he does that. And he dresses it in this academic style of writing, which throws up this fog of superiority and disguises what is really being said in this article. Ian doesn't like games that use environmental storytelling, and he thinks games should not do it at all. He thinks games shouldn't do it. Period. In fact, he outright states that storytelling in games is a waste of time. Yes, sure, you can tell a story in a game, but what a lot of work that is, when it's so much easier to watch television or to read. Oh, God. See what I mean about how problematic this is? It's morose, it's reductionist, it's offensively closed-minded, and extremely judgmental of people who may have a different opinion to you. Ultimately, about something that doesn't even matter. Ian Bogost's article, and the way he says it, there's nothing wrong with the opinion. I keep saying, I can't stress this enough, there is nothing wrong with the opinion. But Ian Bogost's article, and the way he says it, is like me saying I like spicy food. I love spicy food. In fact, I do. I really love spicy food. And now all the food in the world that anyone ever eats, it should be spicy too, because that adheres to my tastes. It makes me happy. Because I like it. Everyone else should. That's exactly what this article is saying. And what does that sound like? A load of shit. Yes, criticise the storytelling device. There are flaws within it. I admit that. Pull it apart even. Signify the strengths and the weaknesses of it. That's all fine. That's critical writing at its essence. But imposing this straight-faced, this is the way it should be mentality is extremely uncomfortable. And to be honest, mate, it's a bit of a dick move. Thank you for being a part of this episode. I love you unconditionally. Please subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up. And share this, if you want to. I'd appreciate it if you did share it. I don't want a real job. I want to eat bananas on camera for the rest of my life.